Welcome back to the program. Now, I also forgot to mention that initially we were three participants in today's program, and Brother Shabir, myself, and we also we invited and he had to be part of the program, Brother Mohsin Abbas, but he's tied up in Manchester. He must be doing equally important job for the Muslim community, and what he's doing, that he's uniting the Hanafi and Shia Muslims on one platform. That's a massive agenda. That's a huge task before him, and we also wish him all the best that he succeeds in that. He's doing a great job. So coming back to the program now, we were discussing.
Yeah, as I was saying, Brother Ijaz, you've got to look at the repercussions of the sanctions regime that was applied to Iran over the last 36 years, effectively. People only talk about the last 4 or 5 years or perhaps 10 years, but sanctions have been there continuously and sort of piled on as a pressure and so on. And it was seen as though it will break Iran. But the reality is that, I was, alhamdulillah, only in Iran, as you know, last week. I spent 4 or 5 days doing the ziyarat and sort of visiting Tehran. And when you arrive in Tehran, it doesn't look like a poor, underdeveloped country by any imagination. The roads are clean, traffic is horrendous. It took me 2 hours to travel 5 kilometers in Tehran.
So you know
the situation, how it is. And new buildings everywhere, the metro and so on. So what's happening? And the facts and the figures are thus that Iran is only dependent on oil revenue, 35% of the GDP. 65% is non-oil related revenue in Iran. That's one factor. Secondly, in economics and the World Bank, what we call the purchasing power parity. It's not the exchange rate that matters, because when we talk about, okay, for £1 you get 170 rupees, that's meaningless, really. But what does that £1 buy in Pakistan? In reality, it buys quite a lot when you think about it. Similarly, average salaries in Iran on an exchange rate basis are only $1,500 a year. But on a purchasing power parity, it's nearly $16,000. So that's not bad income for someone living and operating. Yes, inflation is there and all that kind of thing. So if you look at on the other side, with the Saudis, the Saudi regime relies virtually 95%, 90% on oil revenue. And what we've seen with the oil sort of plummeting prices over the last year or so, from $105 to $110 a barrel to $40. Yes, at the time there was sort of media coverage that the Saudis are doing this to destroy the shale industry in America and all that kind of discussion. But the reality is that Saudis are now sort of dipping into their reserves, are actually raising money by selling government bonds and so on. So their coffers are actually being really significantly lost because the amount of money that they're getting. And at the end of the day, the 12,000 or so princelings that live off the oil revenue, they're either raping women in California or creating chaos in Mina
or Landmark Hotel in London,
or wherever, wherever you go. So the money that they're squandering is totally useless. They're not. And on the other hand, the other way that they're wasting their resources is supporting all these takfiri groups everywhere.
It would be interesting for you. More than 5,000 Saudis, they visit London every month. And you can see, if you go to Knightsbridge, Chelsea, High Street, Kensington, those areas, you will find all the pavements and the walking pedestrian lines, thronged with the zombies, Saudi zombies, driving big cars and parking illegally everywhere, or buying number plates for £7 million for one car. So they are already burning their petrodollars from both ends.
Sure.
You're right.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, because they're so much dependent on oil revenue, therefore what happens with the oil price has more impact on Saudis than Iran, if you like, because as I said, only 35% of the revenue that Iran gets. And Iran also has taxation. it has income tax, it has corporation tax. So the revenue streams that the state has are multiple for many resources. While in Saudi, as we know, it's non-tax regime. Therefore, the government is not able to raise any revenue through taxation. The only thing that relies on oil. Now, if you put this sort of economic situation and the revenue that's being generated from oil into the mix of what they're trying to sort of, as you were saying, have some kind of a strategy to have discussions with Iran. Perhaps it could be due to the economic crisis that they're facing. Therefore, they want to sort of make a better dialogue with Iran. However, what I do believe is that no matter what happens, because Saudi regime was created by our government here in the past. The London basis was the really, if you like, the sparkle that created the Saudi regime in the 20s and the 30s. So long as our government, the British government, continues to support the Saudi regime with all kinds of pat on the back, selling military equipment, and the visitors that go to Saudi Arabia from the government and so on come back with Rolex watches and freebies, then that's the way the Saudi regime is surviving.
That's a very clear manifestation of a nation that never bowed to the pressure. Rather, the more pressure came in 36 years, the more powerful they emerged. And I can say, you were talking about Greece. After winning the recent elections, the Syriza party led by Alex Tsipras,
yes.
He has formed a team of 10 people, the economists and the diplomats and industrialists, and they are and all energy gurus. They wanted to enter Tehran next week, but they said they would be busy in the preparation of the Muharram and Ashura. So they would be visiting Iran, their team, in the first week of November. Now just imagine one thing from there. And I recently read an article in Tehran Times that they have revived 30 major industries in Iran only in last 2 months, and they were previously mothballed for the last 20 years or so. They have revived them. And I tell you, I was last week, I was a couple of weeks ago, I was in Paris, and I compared the Paris metro with Tehran metro. And Tehran metro is equally punctual, equally fast, and equally subscribed in terms of the customers, those who use that, as France is. So these are the indicators that show and prove that some real economic, improvement is there. Some national measures they have been taken in the right direction, and this is even before that, when they are getting their $58 billion out of $120 billion of frozen assets. They're getting it start of next year. So before that, you can see all these indicators, they are very much in place in Tehran. So infrastructure development was there. They never slept in these 36 years. They kept working. What do you think on that?
Well, not only did they not sleep, but they were actually not even drowsy at all. Yeah. If you look at the metro that was built, it was virtually built by Iranians. Yeah. It wasn't sort of imported technology from Russia or China or from France because of sanctions and all other issues. If you look at the towers that have been built, they've been built by the Iranians themselves. You look at all the infrastructure, not just in Tehran, but if you go to Mashhad, you go to Qom, you go to Shiraz, to Isfahan, and many other cities, you see that developments are taking. One of the newest development, which was reported in the Financial Times only a few months ago, was this new bridge, the Garden Bridge, which has been built in Tehran by it was the architectural design of a 26-year-old woman, dare I say, architect in Iran. So that shows that women are active in all walks of life.
Going back to the diplomatic overtures, I find 3 people extremely important in the Saudi royal palace after the king. Because if at all some sort of meeting has to take place, that might take 1 year, 2 years from now between Rahbar in Tehran and King Salman in Riyadh. It has to take another 2 years or so. if the situation is engendering. So, but before that, the three people are important in. I mean, they would be having preliminary meetings, maybe starting after 6 months or so. So we have the Interior Minister, who is very powerful, Mohammed bin Naif, again Suderi blood. Then we have Ahmed bin Salman, King's son. And then Adil al-Jubair, their foreign minister, who is a non-royal, the first non-royal, and at the helm of affairs, especially in the foreign policy. I'm seeing from 6 to 9 months or 6 months to a year, maybe on the sidelines of UN General Assembly meeting, maybe not this time, but September 2016, that Adil al-Jubair is shaking hands with Jawad Zarif at some time. But they will have to cover so many ditches, because Adil bin Jubair is the guy who was very thanatophobic when he was in the United States as the Saudi ambassador. And on 11th of October 2011, precisely, the FBI, they concocted a plan. They said some assassins, they have been sent from the Iranian government, and they are going to assassin you. A sort of, this is a spooky Ridley Scott sort of movie they were creating. And they scapegoated Arbab Siar and Ghulam Shakuri, the two Iranians. And they pleaded not guilty. One of them is at large, not being captured. So against that backdrop, if they have to shake hands, maybe on OIC meeting, it's taking place in next 3 months, and if that is happening, or some sort of Gulf security, Arabian Peninsula security, if that meeting is going to take place, and Saudi Foreign Minister Adil al-Jubair and his Iranian counterpart Jawad Zarif, they are shaking hands. So between taking hands out of the pocket and shaking, there's a huge gap. So they will have to fill that gap. We'll come later on to that program. But I would like to mention to our viewers that this is a live interactive program. We will take one more break in about 15 minutes from now. And after that break is concluded, we will open the lines for you so you can take part in today's discussion. Now, Shabir Bhai, taking a cup and taking it closer to the lips, there's a lot of difference. What do you think?
Look, insofar as shaking hands is concerned, I'll tell you an incident that occurs, and it was reported to me by a very good friend of ours who used to be the Iranian ambassador in London, Aghay Akhundzadeh. I'm sure you've met him, you know him. He used to be responsible, or still is, during Foreign Minister Muttaqi's time, looking after the Asian region. And there was a meeting in Karachi of the, I think, Islamic conference. And at that time, Ahmadinejad was in power, and King Abdullah, prior to Salman, was the king, and they were both together there. And at Karachi, after the meeting, both Abdullah and Ahmadinejad had hand in hand walking like friends. And Akhundzadeh reported this to me personally, and this is first time being related on TV at this moment. This story, which was related to me by Brother Akhundzadeh, he said that King Abdullah told Ahmadinejad that if the Americans are watching this, they will be terribly frightened that we are walking hand in hand. So these sort of things do happen. Okay, now how significant is those shaking hand? Is it just superficial, or is it just because the atmosphere was there that they're walking hand in hand? Did it have much mileage? All those things are left for people like you and me to analyze what significance it has, or people who specialize in body language and so on.
Not but today.
Sorry.
Please go on.
So what I think is important is not these sort of high-profile incidents of shaking hands and becoming headline news. What is fundamentally important is that if everything that happens in the Middle East is blamed on Iran. For instance, the deaths of 1,300 or so, which happened in Mina, Saudi authorities have blamed it on Iran. What happens in Yemen they blame it on Iran. What is happening in Syria, they blame it on Iran. So if what happens in Gaza, they blame it on Iran. So until that mindset changes in the decision-making process in Saudi, I think we will not go very far. Of course, I think, as I said in the beginning, that Iran and Rahbar, Ayatollah Khamenei, are very much interested in having dialogue with any of the Muslim nations, even those countries which are really creating the biggest problems on this planet, because the philosophy of the Shia school of thought is to have good, loving, compassionate relationship with all Muslims. And at the end of the day, what I think we have to realize, Brother Ejaz, is that Saudi regime does not represent any Sunni thinking at all. It's a Takfiri thinking, it's the Wahhabi thinking. And how old is Wahhabism? 100 years old? Perhaps
200 years.
I mean, from the philosophical, but as a sort of, in a political realm, it's less than 100 years old. So it's a new philosophy that has no roots. Okay, if you talk about the Hanafi school or Shafi or Maliki, they have deep roots from the time or soon after the Prophet. But when you look at the Wahhabi thinking, in fact, for Wahhabis, it's not only Shias who are baddies, but all Sunnis are baddies. I mean, the so-called ISIS or Daesh, when they kill people, they don't kill just the Shias, they kill Sunnis, they kill Christians, everyone. When bomb is planted in Lahore, it kills everyone.
Now, I have conceived and drafted a policy document which I sent it across to the right corners, and that comprises 20 pages. It's a research article that what would be the preconditions for such a handshake, and I encapsulate those 20 pages into one sentence, and we will elaborate that as the time goes in today's program, that how difficult, how cumbersome it would be for the supreme leader to forgive the unforgivable. So that's a debate, and we'll carry on. And I have tried to abridge it into 7 points. Now we will discuss those 7 points, and one by one, and I will take your expertise, opinion, your erudite, perception on that how you think about that. Now there are conditions, in my view. If those 20 pages, I bring them down to 7 points, then obviously there are preconditions which are there. And starting with the condition number 1, as you and we have been discussing that for the last 3 years or so, that there has been a time, all the time, to internationalize the management of Haramain Sharifan. Now, so many people, they have done a host of programs on the crane fall and stampede in Mina, and they have been using the word mismanagement. You and we never borrowed that term. We used the term incapacity. Incapacity is there for the last 60 years, 70 years, or since 1932, ever since this was declared a Saudi state, from Hijaz to a Saudi state. So obviously, if we discuss that, then the points that come to my mind is that if they internationalize, now that was a very interesting case at the start of this year when they were asking Pakistan to send troops to defend Saudi Arabian territories, which were not under any sort of threat at all, and they would not be. So Pakistan said, and good sense prevailed there, and they said, no, the nation is not in the mood to support you. There are about 27 to 28% Shias in Pakistan's 200 million population, and there are about, they make their best efforts, Saudis, to hide the statistics, but there are credible sources, the Western independent sources, they say that out of the population of 30 million in Saudi Arabia, there are more than 5 million Shias. And certain people, they're in Taqiyya, they're scared, so they're hiding their identity. So once this regime we can call in English or French regime, or we can call them regime also. So once that regime that falls, min shaitan regime, so that regime is scattered, then obviously Shias will come up as happened in Iraq.
Sure.
So if they internationalize, this would be easier. 57 Muslim nations, they invite them, and they can easily manage, and they can revolve the presidentship of that bloc. And I call it to myself the Consortium of Muslim States for Management of Haram Sharif. So I call it CMS for MHS. What do you think on that idea?
I think it's a discussion which has been going on in the press since the crisis, and also Agha Rouhani's speech at the United Nations also talked about this particular matter, and of course the Speaker of the Parliament, Larijani. So there is not muted discussion, but actually quite vocal discussion now that the Makkah and Medina, these two places, should be in some kind of international custodianship. It's not only mismanagement. I think the word mismanagement is so weak to describe what has happened.
Incapacity.
Not just incapacity. I think it's malicious and criminal activity that has taken place. Those are because Larijani was talking about, and one of the other leaders in the Iranian administration said that Iran is actually thinking of taking international court action against the Saudi regime on this particular matter, as I'm sure you're aware of. So if it's internationalized through putting forward the thought that this was a criminal activity. You see, mismanagement can be, if you have a party at a restaurant and, food doesn't come on time, that's mismanagement, or you organize something, it doesn't go on time.
We will carry on discussing that, but I've been asked to take a break. So we take the second break, and after we come back, and the telephone lines would be open. So you are very welcome to make telephone calls to ask any question pertaining to today's subject, or you share your views, valuable views, and add to the strength of this program. So we take another short break.